So we got a few folks online. Yep, everyone ready to rock and roll. Okay, in the interest of starting on time, welcome to the insurance webinar series presented by SortSpoke and BDO. Today's session will be talking about tackling new business submissions. We'll be providing practical automation strategies to improve your underwriting productivity teams by up to 5 times. So let's introduce the folks on the panel this morning. My name is Craig Mockin. I head up sales at SortSpoke. Joining me today is Brandon Robinson, our Director of Customer Success at SortSpoke, and from BDO, Andre Asayev, who is Practice Leader, Modern Workplace, BDO Canada. As far as an agenda is concerned, we're going to focus on where does SortSpoke help. We'll give you an idea of some real results from both MGAs and carriers in the Canadian marketplace, give you a demo of SortSpoke, talk to you about automation opportunities, in particular about how do you integrate SortSpoke into existing technology, and how to get you the best automation solution. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, you can save them to the end. You can put them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. Just a couple of notes. We want to mention that this is being recorded, so you can get a copy of this afterwards if you would like it at all. And again, Q&A at the end. So let's get rolling. So just to start off and give you an idea of the partnership between SortSpoke and BDO, we are partners. BDO started out as being a customer for SortSpoke, so they have a number of use cases that they use SortSpoke for internally. That led to an opportunity for SortSpoke to become a reseller. There are multiple customers that BDO serves that SortSpoke is involved in, helping their customers get through PDF documents much faster than they can do manually, helping them with that automation approach, helping them get better results and better, cleaner data. Kind of an interesting thing here, we are very close. We tend to finish each other's sentences, so we work very well together. Andre, over to you.
Thank you, Craig. Welcome, everyone. And I am a representative of BDO here. And specifically, BDO is a very mature organization. We just celebrated 100 years this year. But for the sake of this audience, we do a lot of different services. And I'm representing the advisory services group in here, focused on different financial services for the banks, for the insurers, for the lenders, for wealth and investment management organizations. We do work across multiple business units related with tax, accounting, assurance, business advisories. And we do, specifically my team does, a lot of integrations and a lot of process automations in the field of financial services and insurance. And that's what BDO does. And we do it quite effectively for a little bit of more than 25 years, probably. So welcome, everyone, and happy to talk about how BDO and SortSpoke work together for the automation perspective. Craig?
Thanks, Andre. So let's focus on SortSpoke for a second. What is the problem that SortSpoke solves? It is anywhere, the problem we're very focused on is anywhere in your organization where you have people that as part of their job involves reading a PDF, looking for certain pieces of information that they require in order to complete a downstream business process. That is the problem that SortSpoke helps to solve. And the problem with all that is that it's expensive work. You've got underwriting teams, for example, commercial underwriters, doing fairly mundane, fairly low-level work. And these are highly paid, highly trained people that you've got doing that menial work. The second thing is, of course, that anytime that they're doing this data extraction work, they're taking time away from actually serving brokers, serving customers, underwriting new business. And thirdly, and this is really important, particularly when it comes to the intake of information that you're going to base your underwriting decisions on, is that everybody makes mistakes, whether it's transposing the information or rekeying it. So what is SortSpoke? We're a cloud-based data extraction tool. We're a product company. We use artificial intelligence and machine learning to help turn your documents into data. Generally, we drive 3 different types of benefits to your organization. One is boosting the productivity of your underwriting team, building their capacity, enabling them to take on more risk, underwrite more, more opportunities, and drive more revenue. Reduce risk by decreasing the number of manual errors that they create when they're doing that transposition work, and improving turnaround times, getting back to brokers faster, getting back to customers faster, which ultimately leads to driving more revenue. When to choose SortSpoke. So SortSpoke isn't right for every use case, but where it is right is where you need 100% accuracy, where the value you place on the data that's coming out of that data extraction process is very high. That has a material impact on your revenues, on your profitability, on your risk. That's a great use case for SortSpoke. Typically, operations use cases. So I've mentioned underwriting team. A commercial underwriting team is a great example, because these are the areas where there's usually a bottleneck of amount of submissions coming in that need to get handled in a timely fashion, and you need to do that quickly, and you need to do it accurately. And thirdly, these are where we focus is on helping you with the most complex documents. And what do we mean by complex? It's high variation, almost entirely unstructured documentation, where there is just no rhyme or reason to the way the data is presented from one submission to another. Where do we help with insurance teams? We're not just focused in the P&C market, but we're going to focus our discussion for the most part on property casualty and, in fact, commercial submissions for today's discussion. So we help commercial underwriting teams process incoming applications, renewals. We can help surety teams with processing financial statements, getting the key pieces of financial information off those documents that they need, surety bonds, specialty applications of any kind. Particularly what we see in this kind of environment, there's a lot of brokers who will just send anyone's application in to get a quote. We can help with that. And the other area I'll focus on just a little bit is the claims side of things, which is, again, any claims that are coming in, even if there's a standardized, digitized claim submission, there's usually a lot of support documentation that comes along with that. But even then, first notice of loss could be coming in on different carriers. First notice of loss documentation, and there could also be loss runs that are part of that claims adjudication process. Will help with all that too. Brandon, over to you.
Hi, Craig. Just a reminder, you're probably used to the webinar approach where you're getting talked at. So feel free to make it as two-way as possible by putting your comments or your questions into the chat box or that Q&A section there. I'll remind you that a couple times, so don't be shy. We're happy to kind of do this live as we go. One of the things I want to kind of leave you with today when you're done this session is to think about SortSpoke as a technology that's a little bit different than other kinds that you might have talked about in the past. What we're really here to try and help you with is to help your business users, your subject matter experts, like your underwriters, like your claims processors, your adjudicators, to get more done and do it in a way that suits their workflow. And this isn't, and due respect to us technologists on the call, this isn't technology for technology people. This is technology for business users. And what we're trying to do is give you the solution to a problem that's real, it's tangible, but you can stand it up and get it working on any kind of document, any kind of submission, any kind of claim in a couple of days. And instead of it being like some huge project where you got to spend 12 months trying to get results, you can actually start to get results really quickly. And one of the things that Andre and I will kind of talk about a little bit later in the session on where some of the opportunities for automation are, is you can plug SortSpoke in as an island into an existing process, but when you start to tie the data part, the document part together with the power of some of the automation tools that exist out there, things like new business submissions can get tackled in a completely different way that'll save your team time, that'll make them feel better. There's a word you don't hear very much in technology, is the feeling, and they'll actually be able to get more done. And you can do things like make more money, close more premiums, get more risks on the books, and triage your underwriting in such a way that helps you win and be a better customer or better service provider for your customers. We're trying to help you accomplish, like Craig said earlier, maintaining that 100% data accuracy. So some tools are like, hey, send us your documents, we'll send you some data. Good luck, hope it's right. We're trying not to go through that approach. We're trying to help you guys maintain the human in the loop so that you can keep that data as close to 100% accurate by having them make the final decision, but produce an automation opportunity where we can increase the efficiency of the use of their time as much as possible. So something like 100% data quality, but 90% automation or reduction in human effort, to put another way, is kind of what we're aiming for. How we'll do this is, and I'll show you this in just a sec, it's any kind of document, get it into the system, start to show SortSpoke where the fields of information are. You get complete control over data models and what you're looking for and how you're looking for it. There's no one right answer. And SortSpoke doesn't come pre-trained in any way. Just because we do a particular kind of document in other places, SortSpoke doesn't transfer that learning to other customers. So you get the opportunity to do it your way, in a way that makes the most sense for you, and watch it start to quickly learn to help augment your team to do that better. Whether it's a really unstructured document, like a contract or an agreement or something, or a really structured document, something as simple as an invoice or a highly structured application form, you can start to see it work in just that first few samples. I'll just briefly mention that you can do all kinds of different kinds of data, whether it's big blocks of data, whether it's little pieces of data, whether it's checkboxes or tables. There's a way to kind of capture everything with SortSpoke, including some handwriting. And if anyone has any handwriting examples that they'd like to talk about, again, throw that in the chat. I'd rather address that as a specific need. If you run into some handwriting, that's something we can help you with too. One of the reasons we like to keep the humans in the loop is we're trying to make this a better risk position to put you in. As insurers, you guys don't want to take on additional risk. We know that there's a little bit of risk in terms of that sort of manual data entry problem, as Craig mentioned, but there's also this idea of if you buy a tool to solve a problem and it's a black box to you and you don't know how it got to a certain decision, we don't like that either. So what we do is we give you a canvas and say, paint the masterpiece the way that works for you guys. And you know when you get an answer from SortSpoke or a suggestion of a value that it's because you've coded it. Your team has kind of taken their best practices out of their head and tried to put it into a system that then is scalable and repeatable for your other team members so that you can proactively get to the outcomes and proactively manage that risk in such a way that's easy to defend. But it's also like if anybody ever says, hey, this particular value on a certain application looks weird, looks off, when they see it downstream, maybe in the quoting or policy admin system, you can just go back to the original document in SortSpoke and see exactly where it came from, who processed that document on what day, and there's that full cycle of traceability. If you're ever trying to figure out where certain pieces of information came from, if something slipped through that was incorrect, maybe it was wrong on the original document, now you can go back and check, and it doesn't have to be a big project to do so. Why we're helping you try and do this is pretty straightforward. The amount of time that it takes to process a typical new business submission can be 5, 6, 10 minutes, depending on the kind of application. What we're seeing in customers that are implementing this today, large commercial carriers, mutual companies, MGAs, everybody's got a similar kind of challenge. There's so many applications coming in the front door, the underwriters can't keep up. We're here to try and give the underwriters the leg up. You can take the time that it is a human effort in front of the document to get the data out of it quicker. But then with the automation opportunities we'll talk a little bit more about today, you can start to get quick declines. You can start to triage stuff and say, here are the risks we really want to get to the top of the pile so you can put your underwriters on it faster. Here are the ones that we want to decline. And even setting up with Andre conversations like, hey, maybe we could do some quick decline emails back to the broker to be a good service partner to say to them, hey, thanks for this submission. We're not going to get to it. And what we have been finding in a lot of these conversations is the scalability of these kinds of these workflows today is really difficult because it's kind of the bottleneck is the number of underwriters you have. It's not like there's a new cloning machine coming out where they're going to clone all your best underwriters and you're just going to be able to continue to add to your team. So what we need to try and do is find creative and practical ways to help them get more done with the team that you currently have so that you can continue to push more revenue, push more premiums through the pipeline, but help them kind of separate the forest and the trees so you can find the ones that you covet the most. And the coolest part is even if the documents change over a period of time as you're working on them, you don't need to call SortSpoke. You don't need to have some specialized technology resources help you figure out how to work with them. The underwriters, the triage folks will continue to process them and will learn right on the fly from their examples, and they can just continue on. So it's really robust and flexible in that it allows you to scale in a real sense at the business level. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen on SortSpoke here. Another good time. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them into that question box. Excuse me. Okay, so SortSpoke is a cloud-based system, as Craig mentioned. What that means is you log into SortSpoke with your web browser. It's a really simple interface. It's meant to be as simple as it looks. First, you get your documents into the system. You create a type, and the type that I'm looking at here is a commercial, PNC commercial application that can come from any kind of broker. And we'll get into some of the real challenges with these in a sec when we get into talking with Andre about you get these in an email, and sometimes the body of the email is the submission. But you get all the documents into SortSpoke. You create the fields of information over here on the right-hand side that you're looking to extract from that particular document type. And at the very beginning, SortSpoke doesn't know anything about the information that you're trying to find. So you'll use your cursor to go through and highlight the pieces of information and say, you know, here's the address, maybe here's the risk location, here's the coverages, whatever the pieces of data might be. And as you do that and complete documents, SortSpoke gets a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And after 30, 40, 50 documents, you'll get to the place where I am now, and you actually start to get some suggestions on some of the pieces of information. So as SortSpoke is learning from the different varieties, as it's learning from the different examples that you're showing it, we're going to start to suggest to you, hey, we think these are the pieces of information, you know, relative to this document for this person. It's not going to capture everything. There are going to be some things that you're still going to go through and do a bit of a hybrid role, but you'll start being in this hybrid role where you're manually tagging values and you're correcting suggestions that we're making, and you're adding things that haven't been suggested very early on. And in that first 20 to 30 documents, you'll actually start to see this work in real time with the users. And one of the questions we get asked a lot is, well, every one of them looks different. How are you going to make that work? It's pretty simple. You just do the same thing on the different varieties of these documents, whether they're PolicyWorks ones or they're custom created by, you know, by the broker. And every broker I've noticed has, like, the guy that sits next to them has a different variety of the same template. All of those are going to come into you, and your team's going to process them as they would. And SortSpoke's going to try and help you cut through the noise of what's actually in these documents and make it easier for you to get through them, so that you complete the process and saying accept document. And any piece of data that you've extracted from this document then becomes available for you to use in the next step in the process. And I'll come back to that part when we talk to Andre in a few minutes about how we can take the data that comes out of the submission and use it to do all kinds of cool and awesome stuff. But I want to leave you with the idea that any kind of document that has data on it that you're trying to get off of it is an opportunity to look at SortSpoke. In some of the other business lines that we work with, surety, specialty, that sort of thing, things like financial statements are really helpful. Pulling out the tables of, you know, financial records, or taking out data as it relates to sort of their operating position. You know, if you're looking at E&O or D&O, trying to get data off of them, you know, there's an opportunity to take tables out really quickly, and SortSpoke makes it, you know, I didn't even do anything here. This is a suggested table from SortSpoke that's helped me grab a couple of fields of information from the last few years, if that's what works for me. But again, you get control over what fields of information you'd like based on what's going to make the most sense for your model. We do the same thing in loss runs. Loss runs can be a really tricky one. Sometimes the shape of them don't fit nicely with other ones. Some of them look like tables, some of them look like rows. We have the ability for you to capture all kinds of different size, shapes, and pieces of information from different documents so that you can standardize it. So it's easier for your team to capture it. It's easier for you to then use that information in the next step in the process. The last example that I'm going to show you here is just again on another kind of application. And one of the things that's cool about these is we have a bunch of different business lines that people work with. And whether you're getting an application for commercial, or if you're getting an application for like a specialty line or something, you know, generally an application form is an application form, and they say similar stuff. But where it can start to get really complicated is sometimes they look like this one, where it's like boxes and structures and all that sort of thing. And then you run into one that's sort of half and half. And then you run into another one that's a little bit more structured again. It's like, it's kind of all over the place. What's really cool about SortSpoke is we put this in the hands of the people that already know how to figure out the difference between these documents today in the underwriters. And they will just go and train SortSpoke how to do it like they were doing it themselves. And before long, you'll get to this place where we're making these suggestions. They're getting through these documents faster, and the data is available for them to use it in the next step in the process a lot earlier and a lot more consistently than it can be done today. We're going to come back to lots of conversation on this. If there's any questions, again, throw it into the chat. Just trying to give you a quick overview on this today. What I'd like to do next is hand it off to Andre. Instead of talking about him, I'll let him chat a little bit about kind of where the automation opportunities are and what sort of the technologies are that we can use in this approach to try and help you guys. Andre?
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Craig. So SortSpoke is a great tool when you need to extract the data, right? But always the big question is, what do you do next? Or what do you do before you can get to the extraction exercise? And this is where we can come in and help working together with the SortSpoke by the use of the technology that we call, or known in the world as RPA, which is robotics process automation. So it's a fancy concept, but all in all, it comes to the point that you can have a digital assistant, some sort of a software robot sitting on your table or at your laptop that helps you to do the things that you would normally do manually. For example, sort your emails or upload the files somewhere. In our example is read through your intake mailbox where you receive claims or you receive new applications, sort them through, PDF them, and upload them to the SortSpoke so you don't have to do it manually. And you can focus on something else. You can focus actually on the underwriting. And RPA is really nice and great technology. Next slide, Brandon, please. That helps you deal with a lot of things. And why it's important today. There are a lot of different researches that you can find over there and take a look, but the core benefit of the RPA is efficiency, it's retention, and a lot of organizations, they're getting a lot of benefits very quickly with a very short payback time, with a very high ROI in different areas, in operations areas, in finance areas, in sales, in underwriting, and pretty much everywhere across the organization. Next slide, Brandon, please. So how the RPA fits into any organization? Again, there are a lot of benefits from the SortSpoke in terms of making the things more effective, increasing the accuracy of the data. Where the RPA augments the benefits of the SortSpoke is adding additional things like reliability, right? It's a repeatable workflows that you can do over and over and over again. And by the way, 365 days a year, not just 5 business days a week, 7 days a week, 24 hours. It actually increases the retention by shifting the low value work of going through the emails, extracting the data, and clicking the buttons or doing data entry away from the, in our case, underwriters, so they can focus on higher value work, on the more valuable and more interesting work for them, thus increasing the retention of your employees. The other important impact is actually cost saving, right? It's automation. It means transition of high value work and low value work into different stages increases your efficiency. It increases the balance of people sitting and waiting versus people actually doing work. And of course, obviously, accuracy, right? SortSpoke gets to high level of accuracy of data extraction. The RPA can get you into the high level of accuracy of using that data downstream, entering that data into your underwriting system or policy management system, processing the claims on the fly by applying the business rules, validation rules, and risk rules in order to make a decision and provide the recommended decision based on the claim so that the adjudicator can make a final call and either accept it or override. And all in all, it all results in ROI, high ROI, usually within the 9 and 12 to 12 months, you get the full payback on the implementation of RPAs through the increase of efficiency, through the impact on your labor, through the increase of operation speed, and all those kind of things that every organization does care about that results in higher margin and higher revenue. Next slide, Brandon. So how do we work with SortSpoke together? Brandon said, SortSpoke is great at extracting the documents. Where RPA comes in, and on the diagram on the screen, you can see the UiPath is a representation of that technology, but it doesn't have to be just that. But where it comes is what happens before the SortSpoke, and definitely what happens after you extracted the data using the SortSpoke. All your intake, whether you have a scanned documents from the enterprise scanner coming into a specific folder for review, whether it's an email that you receive and you have some data inside the PDF or in the body of the email, that's where the automation and RPA can help and blend that data together before you pass it to SortSpoke. So no human needed in there. Where it helps downstream after you extracted the data. Think about this. You had the unstructured document came in, you use SortSpoke to convert that unstructured document data from multiple documents into now fully structured, I'll call it software-enabled data that RPA can utilize to apply different business rules, different workflows, different automations. And it can work with the variety of tools and platforms that you already may have in-house, whether those tools and platforms are modern, whether they are very old and legacy like green screens, it doesn't really matter for the RPA. It can do exactly everything that any human can do today, except one thing, making subjective decisions. The moment you can describe the process using the if, else, then rules and instructions, that's where the automation can come in and help connect the dots together between multiple systems and multiple units and multiple processes. Over to you, Brandon.
Really important point there, Andre, is coupling your subject matter expertise with the kind of technology that gives you the best of both worlds is why this is such a good fit together. And this use case in particular, you know, that one example, Andre, you mentioned a second ago, where the documents come into kind of a centralized email box. One of the questions I get all the time from customers is, how do we get that into SortSpoke? But sometimes the submission is just an attachment, but sometimes the submission is just an email, or sometimes it's a little bit of the email and an attachment. What we've done with other customers, and what Andres and his team are working on implementing in a bunch of different places on this front, is take the email itself, turn it into one big PDF, send that into SortSpoke, and let the underwriters or the triage team get the information off of wherever it makes the most sense in those scenarios, so that you're taking this super diverse, who knows, choose your own adventure, knows what's coming, and turning it into the core pieces of information so that you can quickly and consistently make decisions early on in the stage, the cycle, so you can make quote decisions faster, you can make decline decisions faster. This is a really great example of and depending on whether it's, you know, email provider one, or if you use Outlook or Exchange, or if it goes into Guidewire, or if you have another or older legacy technology, as Andre mentioned, no biggie. All of these pieces get handled because tools like UiPath, tools like Pega, tools like Automation Anywhere, tools like Microsoft Power Automate, all of them are built to try and help you be the glue, the connectors between these different places. SortSpoke is this piece in the middle that helps you deal with the documents really, really well, which traditionally in these kinds of workflows has actually been the biggest challenge. Now that we've got a handle on that, the sky's kind of the limit for you guys as the customers to say, how can we help you achieve, you know, these pockets of process and turn them into something a bit more cohesive and a bit more scalable without breaking the bank. And we'll come to this in a second about you know, how we can help you get started during the Q&A. I'll fire a question at Andre about how we can get started together. Craig?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, and thanks, Andre. Yeah, so hopefully at this point you've got an understanding that SortSpoke is a business user tool. This is an augmentation tool. This is something to help your current teams do their work better, faster, more accurately. And at the same point in time, we've also, I want to make sure that we've addressed the fact that this is a tool that is built for enterprise. So we have all the security and all the capability and availability of resources in order to handle your volumes, but also handle it securely. So there's standard industry practices that are in place, both at our web hosting, which is AWS, as well as within SortSpoke itself. Last year, SortSpoke was SOC 2 Type 1 certified, and we're on the cusp of becoming SOC 2 Type 2 certified within the next several weeks. We also conduct annual penetration tests, and we've been reviewed by many of the largest enterprises around the world to make sure that we keep your data safe. So how do you work with us? It's really simple. We start out by what we refer to as booking a discovery call. We really just want to talk to you a little bit about what your challenges and your problems that you're facing within your underwriting team. Get to know you a little bit better. We strongly encourage you to try it out. This is the best way for your teams to get their hands on SortSpoke, and our proof of concepts are really all about giving you the licenses for your folks, for a couple of your folks, to try out SortSpoke. Your subject matter experts will have hands-on in a non-production environment to work with SortSpoke, to understand its value to their workflow, to give them a hands-on experience with the user interface, and help them understand what the benefits are, both in terms of productivity lift, turnaround times, accuracy of data. We'll measure those things and give you an idea at the end of the proof of concept, so that you've got some ideas to the time savings that are involved for your team, as well as the accuracy that SortSpoke achieved. Most of our POCs last for a couple of days, and it really depends more not on us, but on the resource availability on your side. As I said, we'll review the benefits with you. We'll help you with an ROI, help you build a business case, so that you can inject that information, that understanding into your planning approach for the next fiscal year. We can put you into production right away. It's really just a matter of, as I say, just going through some of those steps and gaining an understanding and appreciation for the benefits and the integration work that is required. So with that, we've got a few questions that are happy to address, and I'm just looking over on the chat and the Q&A, and I've got a couple here. I'll start off with, maybe that'll generate a couple more questions along the line. First question I've got here, Brandon, maybe this one is to you, is a pretty common question we get is, how long does it take for SortSpoke to learn?
It's a really important question, Craig. And if I had a nickel for every time I get asked that question, I'd have a big pile of nickels. The interesting thing about SortSpoke is its machine learning learns in order of magnitude of tens to hundreds of documents. So we're not the kind of machine learning where it's like you need thousands and hundreds of thousands of documents to kind of get up and running. I've seen use cases get started in as little as 15 documents. I've seen use cases get really tuned up and working really, really well after 100 to 250 documents. For the new business submissions, I kind of break it down into two buckets. There's policy works, and then there's the high volume ones you get from brokers that do kind of a regular looking template. And then there's the everybody else, including that email scenario that we talked about earlier. So you kind of get a different performance in each one of those. The policy works ones work in like no time, 20, 30, 40 documents. If you have 80% of your submissions coming from like 5 or 6 brokers that have their own version of the template that they've used, you'll have a similar experience with those 50 to 100 documents. The longer tail ones where there's a little less consistency and it's a bit more random, a couple of hundred of those generally do the job. It really depends, but I want to stress here that it's not just simply a case of how many documents you show it. It's about how many fields you're trying to extract. And if you're trying to do a relatively modest number of fields, 15, 20, 25, stuff like that from a submission, generally it works in that first 100 to 200 documents. Where it can get more complicated is if you're trying to do like a super big list of fields that include very long tail pieces of information that don't exist, that don't show up often. And I'm thinking of like, if you're trying to do like an exhaustive list of coverages, like show me every coverage that ever existed ever in history, and you've only ever shown SortSpoke an example of a particular coverage once or twice, that's the kind of thing that it's not going to learn, and it's not going to have enough examples to learn from. But that's, again, another reason why, like Andre said, you keep humans in the loop, because they make subjective decisions. The machine learning and the automation tools are here to help empower them. What we're trying to do is get the underwriters and the smart folks in the room to continue to do their job, do the thing that they're really good at, but help them save time and respect what they can do in such a way that makes it easy for them to get it done and powerful enough that you can make it part of a larger workflow as you move forward.
Thanks, Brandon. There's another question here. Andre, this one looks like it's for you. Is UiPath the only tool that can be used to integrate to SortSpoke?
That's a very great question, Craig. And the answer is no, UiPath is not the only tool. It is the leading tool for the RPA space these days on the market, but it's not the only one. And to be honest, we always engage with the clients in the conversation, which tool is the right for them. And there are a number of different questions or scenarios where we can suggest you go with the UiPath, or you go with, for example, Power Automate, or you go with the Pega. Some of the things that may drive the decision which automation platform to use is how modern your applications that are used in a particular process, right? Like, for example, if you are really a modern organization and you went through the exercise of digitizing or modernizing all your systems, and you are running on the most recent, most greatest platforms that are out there in the world, probably the best approach to enable automation for you will be using Pega and the behind the scenes automation using different APIs, transferring the data from point A to point B. But if you, for example, again, quite an organization that has a history of using legacy platforms, even from those old days where you had black and green screens, then probably we will suggest a tool that is more like a UiPath that can mimic human behaviors, mimic human actions, clicks, going through screens, just simply because the application landscape is very old and not that robust. And then you get stuff, everything in between, right? Where multiple different platforms can play. And it really depends on the use case. For example, we did had engagements with SortSpoke and us together, where we had a client with really a mix of legacy and non-legacy systems. And we actually used the combination of different tools. We used Power Automate because the financial system, for example, was Business Central. That's quite robust, right? And you can use Microsoft tool stack, which talks very well between each other. But on the other hand, their policy management system was very legacy green screens. And we used UiPath for that matter. And it worked perfectly. It worked great. They achieved the ROIs they wanted. They achieved them within 6 months, and they're getting the benefits as we go every day. Greg?
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. Yeah, so we've got a couple more questions. I think we've got time for them. The first question I've got here is, can SortSpoke work in a full straight pass-through mode? Brandon?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Short answer is yes. It really just depends on the use case, right? So some of the SortSpoke customers in insurance today have a mix. They have some documents that need to have human intervention on every field, on every document because of the complexity or because of their risk tolerance, which is generally the more important one. They don't want the data to be anything other than completely QA'd 100% right all the time. But there are certain examples where after a while, if you have a document or two or three, like I'll pick on PolicyWorks for this discussion. Let's just say you trained it on a couple thousand PolicyWorks submissions and you're really happy with how it's running. You have complete control over how much automation you go from, 100% human intervention, check every document, every field, all the way up to just let it fly and never touch it, and literally every shade of gray in between. And we kind of leave it up to you to decide how to do that. And you can actually configure that directly inside SortSpoke's user interface. So it doesn't have to be this all or nothing sort of approach, and it really depends like on the use case. My recommendation though is the higher value the data is to you, the more critical it is to keep it as clean, as tight and correct as possible. And if the time savings of a particular use case where humans are doing this today support it, keep them involved, because they're gonna contribute the highest value portion of their job in this, which is making sure the data is right and making subjective decisions. If you can give them as much of their time back and then help automate around it, you'll find that overall the return on investment is great, even if you still spend a minute or 2 minutes checking sort of the submission and its supporting documents.
Awesome. There's another question here for you, Andre, and that is, can you outline just the steps and the timeline that's involved in a typical integration project?
That's a very great question, Craig. Knowing that Brandon and you spoke about how the SortSpoke engagement, how quickly you can get the SortSpoke up and running all the way into production, the automation is a little bit more complex, right? So depending on the use case, the enablement of the automation can be from a couple weeks to a couple months, right? And typically the way we suggest everyone to engage is something we call Jumpstart package, right? It's very similar to the engagement that SortSpoke does with the trial environment. But the way how we do it is we do a high-level assessment. Here's the roster of the processes you would like to automate. And we provide an advice back, say, some processes are more manual and less business rule driven. Some processes are more business rule driven, and we pick and choose and help you prioritize those processes so you can achieve the ROI faster. And then we chirp through that list using a combination of pilot implementations and actual implementations to deliver the process into the production, having your team engage through each step day in, day out, and week in, week out, and also have a dependency on your availability rather than ours. But typically, the jumpstart between 4 to 6 weeks to get the process almost fully production ready. And again, depends on how many business rules you have, what's the complexity of the process, that time can vary. Typically, after the jumpstart, there could be different engagements based on the pace, how you want to proceed with the automation, the pace, how you want to enable the processes inside the organization, and the amount of investment you would like to do into this process. Sometimes you can make a decision that we're going to do 1 or 2 processes and spend 6 months revisiting the ROI and measuring the benefits. That's totally fine. It makes sense because it's the automation. And but the key here is you start getting the benefits with the very first process being automated. You start getting them right away instead of waiting for 12 or 24 months as with traditional implementations. Okay.
Thanks,
Great.
Andre. Thank you. So Brandon, I think we've got time for about one, maybe 2 more questions. This one's come up several times. And the question is, if I have multiple addresses, like maybe a broker address, a client address, maybe there's a lender's address or something else, but there's multiple addresses on an application, how does SortSpoke figure out which one is associated with which field that I want to extract?
Going to keep adding to my pile of nickels here. I get this one a lot too. So the cool thing about how SortSpoke works is we're not just looking for a specific position on a page or something to try and find a piece of data for you. So in the example where the applicant has an address, or the broker might have an address that's important to you to figure out what broker or what part of a broker it is, and then there's the locations themselves that are covered under the particular submission or policy. SortSpoke does a really clever thing where it actually looks at the context around the information that you're extracting to trying to determine, hey, we think before you've put broker address here, and we think you've put applicant address there, and you've taken location 1, 2, 3 to 40, whatever it might be in these different places. So it's using the clues of the content that's actually provided on the page and trying to learn from those patterns to identify them to try and give you the suggestions. It's powered obviously by the users selecting those different addresses in the right places over time. But as it sees the users doing that, it does a better and better job of making the right suggestion in the right spot based on that context every time.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then something related that's come up is, how does is SortSpoke able to handle and normalize dates and currency?
Yes. Yeah, you can set flags inside SortSpoke now so that you can get the export of a date or an integer or a currency or something into a specific predefined format. We've got a couple of formats for each. Some people like to have the dates come out very tidy. So instead of it saying January 13th, 2006 or whatever it might be in the original document, it'll come out as month, day, year. Yeah, lots of opportunities there too. One of the things that I'll always recommend is if you talk to me or talk to Andre, let's figure some of those out together in terms of what's the best way to do it. There's no one way to do a bunch of these things. There's a whole bunch of right answers. And an example recently where Andre's team is working with a customer doing a use case like almost identical to this right now is one of the conversations was, how can we help you figure out the best combination of fields and what to use them for? And we probably had, I don't know, we had a good 3 hours total since we started just going back and forth on trying to get the data right, trying to get the decisions made so it's going to fit the best. And that's really where the power of this comes in, is you'll look at your workflows a little differently today because there's so many different opportunities than there were previously. So, things like dates and currencies and phone numbers, no big deal. Lots of easy ways to handle it. Let's talk about it.
Sounds good. Brandon, that's all we've got. And Andre, that's all we've got in terms of questions. Brandon, throw it back to you for final words.
That's great. Thank you all so much for attending. Try and get you out of here right on time. We just wanted to say as a final thought that, we think your human beings, your human experts are actually the greatest asset that you have in your organization. We want to try and help you scale them. We want to try and help them make their day feel, and I'm going to use that feel word again, feel better. And we've had underwriters that have used SortSpoke for the first time say to us, like, I don't ever want to go back to doing it the other way. Even if SortSpoke never provided me a suggestion, it just feels so much better. It makes my life better. It makes my day better. We're trying to put that easy and powerful kind of technology that's doing really complicated, interesting stuff in the hands of the business users so that they can kind of be masters of their own domain. And with Andre's team involved, so much more is possible than just the extraction of the data. It's transiting things around and using that information and like I said earlier, maybe even just thinking about quick declines and stuff like that as low hanging fruit. You can get that done in 3 or 4 months, and we want to help your team scale without just trying to add more bodies, which may not be available today. So thanks so much for listening. If there are any other questions, we've got a minute left. Fire them in the chat box there. And as Craig said, we'll be happy to share a copy of the recording, with everybody that attended today. Craig?
Yeah, I think we're good in terms of, I don't see any other questions unless there's anything that's from the folks on that are listening right now. Fire away if you do have something. If not, it's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with you this afternoon, and we look forward to assisting you in any way we can.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Andre.
much. It's been a pleasure. Have a good day.